Angus Young, the immortal icon of rock and roll, is known not only for his legendary duck walk across the stage, but also for a career spanning over 50 years with ACDC, with more than 200 million albums sold worldwide. He has built a net worth exceeding 160 million, owns luxury estates in Sydney and the Netherlands, and maintains a dream-worthy collection of vintage Rolls-Royce, Bentley, and Ferrari cars. But behind the blinding stage lights are losses that can't be measured. The sudden death of Bon Scott, the heartbreaking passing of his brother Malcolm, and harsh criticism that once claimed his onstage persona was too much. Angus never fired back. He just kept playing through the same electrifying riffs that have defined rock for half a century, from a childhood of poverty in Cranhill to the grand stages of music history. Angus Young stands as living proof that passion and loyalty can turn an ordinary man into something timeless. Join us as we explore the luxury, resilience, and enduring spirit of rock's live wire Angus Young in today's video. If you enjoy stories like this, please don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps us out. And feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Right before the Rolls-Royce, before the villa in the Netherlands, before the stadiums filled with tens of thousands chanting his name, Angus Young was just a boy living in a damp little house in Cranhill, a working-class neighborhood in Glasgow. His family, 10 people, shared a 2-bedroom home with gray, moldy walls and wind that hissed through the cracks like a reminder that Scottish winters don't spare the poor. On a cold night in 1963, Angus lay curled beneath a thin blanket, trying to warm his frozen hands. His father, a World War II veteran, was tinkering with the oil heater. His mother was tending the fire, her eyes tired, in that cold that crept through every corner of the house. Only one thing made life feel strangely alive, the sound of his older brother's guitar echoing from the next room. He didn't know why, but every note made his heart beat differently. One day, Angus noticed an old banjo hanging on a hook. He took it down and strummed his first melody slow, off-key, but it made him smile to himself. No one told him to play, no one forced him to learn, just once. His brother Alexander sat beside him and showed him a few basic chords, the rest. Angus learned through sheer will until his fingers bled, until the strings no longer made sound but became part of his body. He treasured that chipped old instrument like it was gold because it was the only thing that felt truly his. But dreams don't feed a family. As times grew harder, his parents made the boldest decision of their lives to move the entire family to Australia. Not because they knew what was waiting, but because there was nothing left to lose. At age 8, Angus sat aboard the ship to Villawood migrant camp, clutching a battered guitar his mother had bought with their last savings. It wasn't a joyful journey. The settlement camp was a row of dusty tin huts, unfamiliar and rough. He was scared. He missed Cranhill. But on the first night in Villawood, when he played the melody he had practiced back home, something happened. Other children stopped and listened. No one said a word. But for Angus, it was the first time someone had truly heard his music. From that cramped little house in Glasgow to stages packed with tens of thousands, Angus carried one thing with him every step of the way, a cheap guitar and a quiet belief that if he just kept playing, everything could change. A 15-year-old boy, hands stained with blood from a slaughterhouse, ink still wet on his shirt, dreamed of becoming a rock star. No diploma, no stage. No one believed in him. All he had was an old Gibson guitar and a faith no one had loaned him. Could that alone be enough for Angus Young to write the legend called ACDC? He practiced every riff, those raw, repeating notes that power every rock anthem. His fingers bled, but he never stopped. When he held that worn Gibson SG, it was like the world opened up, a world where he didn't need permission to be himself. That guitar, in 1970, was everything he owned, and it was that very guitar that carried him not just to the stage, but to million-dollar homes, a collection of Rolls-Royce cars, and arenas where his name echoed across 3 generations. He started by playing with local bands like Kentucky and Tantrum, names long forgotten. But it was there he learned a hard truth: no one welcomes someone who doesn't fit the mold. One night at a rough Sydney bar, the crowd threw bottles at the stage. Convinced Angus was too crazy, the club owner nearly kicked him off mid-show, but Angus kept playing using his teeth, his knees, his whole body like it was the last night of his life. That was the first time he ever heard real applause. Then, in 1973, in the family kitchen, his sister Margaret glanced at a sewing machine labeled ACDC. Both brothers nodded. That was it. The band had a name: short, sharp, and unapologetic. ACDC, alternating current, and a quiet warning to the world that they didn't follow any script. Angus kept his school uniform as his stage costume cheap, eye-catching, and unforgettable. And so he hit the stage like a boy who refused to grow up wild hair, Crimson SG in hand, and the now iconic duck walk, a move inspired by Chuck Berry that soon became his own signature. Just 2 years later, High Voltage 1975 was released. No gimmicks, no polish, just thunderous guitar, a voice that hit like a punch to the chest, and a surge of energy like a lightning storm in the dry season. Angus never stood still. He ran across the stage like a live wire, too full of life to stop. That old Gibson guitar had taken him from broken bottles in dive bars to sold-out stadiums. But would it be enough to hold him steady when the person he loved most was gone, with nothing more than a guitar and a fierce sense of will? Angus Young transformed the raw, restless sound of youth into one of the biggest empires in rock history. ACDC, the band he co-founded with his brother, became not only the embodiment of hard rock, but one of the best-selling music acts in the world. With over 200 million records sold, hundreds of sold-out tours across continents, and a performance style that no one could mistake, Angus did something few dared even to dream of. He took an Australian garage band from bar gigs and backroom stages to the very top of global music charts. More than 5 decades of performing helped him build a personal fortune estimated at $160 million, not through fashion deals, not through brand endorsements, but through one thing: the sound of his guitar. But for Angus, success isn't just the stage. It also lives in the quieter spaces where no applause is needed, no lights pointed his way. And those spaces begin with an orange-painted home in the Netherlands. Some people measure success by the number of bedrooms, but for Angus Young, it's the moment you step through your own door and feel peace, not needing to be seen, not needing to be heard. After decades of touring and thunderous crowds, Angus chose to retreat to Alten, a quiet town in the south of the Netherlands, the birthplace of his wife, Ellen. There, they live in a warm, classic-style villa painted orange, standing out against the country's often gray skies. The house is worth an estimated $3 million to Angus. The real treasure is the small studio tucked behind the garden. Every morning, he wakes up before 6, brews a strong black coffee, carries it to the studio, and sits down to play riffs that have never made it to an album. On the table rests his worn Gibson SG, the same one he carried from Burwood in 1970, and maybe only here when no one's watching. Angus plays without performing, just plays to feel alive, not for the crowd, but for himself. In Kangaroo Point, an upscale suburb of Sydney, he owns a modern villa valued at $5.5 million. It has 6 bedrooms, a green stone pool, an outdoor kitchen, and a European-style fireplace. Every corner looks out over the George River, where the sunset glows like the last light on stage. Here, he often welcomes close friends, playing soft blues while Ellen prepares dinner. Someone once asked him why he kept the house, even after moving to the Netherlands. Angus looked out the window and said, "From here, I can see the old Villawood camp where my family first slept under a tin roof when we arrived in Australia. The house in Alten is where he chose to live. The house in Sydney is what he kept to remember. One home for peace, one for memory, Neither is a reward. They are his way of remembering that music may take you far, but love is where you return. To most people, cars are a status symbol. To Angus Young, they're like metal versions of himself, each one a musical chapter. A different shade of who he is, quiet, explosive, nostalgic, and just a little wild. The Bentley 412-liter, worth nearly $1 million, is his least driven but most meticulously maintained. With its long body and unmistakable British elegance, this car isn't for speed, it's for presence, Angus once said. It's like a slow intro, nobody knows what's coming next, but it demands your attention. He often drives it in the early Dutch mornings, through the misty streets of Alton. No paparazzi, no fans, just a gentleman, his guitar in the back seat, and, sometimes, a blank sheet of music. On the opposite end is his Ferrari 458 Italia, around $250,000, blazing red like stage lights. With an engine that roars like the opening solo to Back in Black, Angus enjoys driving it through the Dutch countryside or during tour downtime, wild enough to remind him he's still that skinny kid who once played with his teeth in the back of a smoky bar. And then there are his rolling thrones, a Rolls-Royce Phantom drophead coupe, $500,000, and a Phantom Series 7, $400,000. Walnut interiors, smoky leather seats. A custom high-end sound system, people assume he rides them for luxury. In truth, Angus uses his Rolls-Royce to think. He often sits in the back seat, listening to a rough track recorded at home, eyes closed, imagining would Malcolm have liked that bridge. Then there's the final and strangest car, a 1935 Ford Model 48, worth about $30,000. Not modern, not flashy, but to Angus, it's the first car I ever drove where I didn't feel I had to prove anything to anyone. One quiet Sunday, he took it around Sydney while the city was still asleep. No assistants, no bodyguards, just him, the old car, and a soft guitar line playing in his mind like life itself was still being written. Someone once asked, "Why don't you buy the newest supercar?" Angus simply smiled, "Because every car I have already tells my story better than words ever could." No drugs, no hard liquor, no wild parties. If there's one thing that sets Angus Young apart from the typical rock star, it's the way he lives after the spotlight, quietly, steadily, with nothing to prove. In over 50 years of performing, no one has ever seen him drunk. Every tour is the same after the show ends. Angus doesn't hit the clubs, he heads to his hotel, turns on a classic football game, and drinks chocolate milk. It's not a joke. It's a real habit, almost a ritual. Black coffee every morning, chocolate milk every night. That's enough. He smokes. Nicotine is the only rock part of his daily routine. He knows it's not good, but keeps the habit as inseparable from him as his schoolboy cap on stage. He doesn't need to change. He only needs to stay honest. At home, there are no personal assistants. Angus prefers doing the grocery shopping himself, cooking his own meals, and spending time in his garden in Alton. Chili peppers are his favorite because, in his words, they're spicy, tough, and need sunlight. Just like me. Every year, he takes a few weeks just to be at home with his wife Ellen, the woman who's been by his side since the earliest days. Before ACDC had a name in the music world, she doesn't walk red carpets. She doesn't go on tour, but every contract, every big decision, Angus brings back to the dinner table where the two of them talk like they've never aged. A man can spend his life on stage, but in the end, what keeps him grounded is a warm meal and the sound of a guitar echoing in the kitchen he calls home. Not every blow comes from fate. Some wounds are carved by the gaze of others through criticism, doubt, or simply misunderstanding. Angus Young has never been caught in a personal scandal, but that doesn't mean he hasn't found himself at the center of controversy. He just jumps around and acts like a clown. The early criticism from the earliest days of ACDC, Angus's stage presence, schoolboy shorts, duck walk, and wild expressions rubbed many the wrong way. One critic once described him as an overgrown child throwing a tantrum on stage. At a show in the U.S., a local paper ran a headline, "Rock or Ridicule." It mocked Angus for dropping to the floor, playing with his teeth, and pretending to be electrocuted during a solo. But to Angus, it was never an act. It was his language, a form of expression he created for himself, especially as someone who, even as a child, never felt comfortable putting his feelings into words. Still, not everyone understood that. Accused of being too repetitive, the most stinging professional blow by the mid-1980s, a portion of the press had begun labeling ACDC a one-trick band, even after Back in Black soared to success. Follow-up albums like Fly on the Wall and Blow Up Your Video were dismissed as more of the same, lacking growth. Some even said Angus only knows 3 chords. His reply was simple: I don't need a 4th chord if those 3 already make people lose their minds. No long debates, no defensiveness. He answered the critics the only way he knew how, with raw energy on stage, and comeback after comeback that no one saw coming. The deeper wounds, loss, and loneliness behind the lights. In 1980, Bon Scott, ACDC's original lead singer and Angus's closest partner on stage, died suddenly of alcohol poisoning. No spotlight, no goodbye, just silence. The band nearly broke, but just months later, Angus and Malcolm chose not to stop. They recorded Back in Black and released it with a completely black cover, a farewell without flowers or fanfare. It went on to sell over 50 million copies, a personal loss turned into legend. Malcolm, the brother, the backbone, the one who never returned if Bon was the band's spirit. Malcolm was its spine, the rhythm guitarist who stood behind Angus, never seeking the spotlight, always keeping time. When Malcolm succumbed to alcoholism, then dementia, and quietly stepped away from the stage, Angus said nothing. During the 1988 tour, his first playing without his brother, he never once looked back, because if he did, Malcolm wouldn't be standing there. Malcolm passed away in 2017, and with that, Angus became the last one carrying the fire from a dream that began in their childhood living room. Health, age, and a silence no one forced. Angus is no longer as strong as he once was. He's smoked for decades. He coughs constantly. At times, he's lost his voice during rehearsals. People have suggested he retire. He just shakes his head. I played guitar before anyone knew my name. I'll play it until no one remembers it. Maybe Angus Young never had a major scandal, but he's faced something harder: being misunderstood, left alone, and outliving the people who mattered most. And somehow, after it all, he's still there, still on stage, still playing, still standing beneath the lights, though his eyes no longer search the crowd. Because now, those eyes are looking for something deeper, a legacy. Angus Young never chased titles, but time, quietly and without ceremony, gave them to him. He was the one who brought ACDC into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2003. He was ranked 24th on Rolling Stone's list of the 100 greatest guitarists of all time. He received the Kerrang Legend Award and in 2012 was named Australia's greatest guitarist. But to millions of fans, Angus is more than just a musician. He is youth itself. He is the stubborn fire of passion. He is the way a person can choose to live fully without needing anyone's permission. At 69, during the Power Up Tour, Angus still wore his schoolboy uniform, still ran across the stage, still duck-walked, still dropped to his knees for solos, still spun in circles as if the weight of that guitar was heavier than the world, and he was the only one strong enough to keep it from falling. Someone once asked him why he never changed his image. Angus simply smiled and said, "I keep it for the boy who played guitar in a small room in Burwood." In 2019, Angus donated $19.206 Canadian dollars to a music therapy program at a hospital for patients battling memory loss. No press release, no cameras, just a quiet tribute to Malcolm and a silent thank you to a fan's mother. No one asked him to do it, but Angus has always chosen to quietly do what's right, because even as a rock star, he has remained a brother, a husband, and a man who believes in kindness. Angus Young stands as proof of something simple. You don't have to fit the mold to be seen. You just have to stay loyal to what you believe in, no matter who laughs, where you start, or how old you are. He began with a battered guitar, and today, he leaves the world with music that will never go out of style, not because of technical perfection, but because it came from somewhere deeply real. The heart? Angus Young didn't just leave behind riffs and records, he left behind a reminder: dreams have no age, and passion, if strong enough, can light an entire life. From a small home in Glasgow to the biggest stages on earth, Angus Young never changed to please anyone. He simply kept following the sound inside his heart and let it lead the way. If this story reminded you of something that once made you strong, that once kept you going, share it in the comments below. Because maybe your story will inspire someone else just like Angus once did. And if you'd like to keep discovering extraordinary journeys like this one, don't forget to like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.